Hello and welcome back to another tutorial. My name is Mike Davies, and in this video I'll be showing you how to create a movie poster with multiple characters using GIMP. I'll be using GIMP version 2.10.22, which is the latest version of GIMP at the time of this tutorial. Before I get into that, don't forget to check out my website at daviesmediadesign.com. As always, I have tons of GIMP and Inkscape tutorials on here. You can get more by becoming a DMD Premium member. And I have tons of free software help articles, so definitely check that out. You can enroll in my GIMP 2.10 Masterclass from beginner to pro photo editing on Udemy. You can enroll in any of my Skillshare classes by visiting gimpschool.com. And as I mentioned, you can get more with a premium membership to Davies Media Design. And I'll include a link to this as well as all the relevant links from this tutorial in the description of the video. I'll be using a series of free stock photos from Unsplash for this tutorial. You can just click this little down arrow. I went with the large size for all of these. I'll also be using this free font from Google Fonts. Just click Download Family. I do have a tutorial on how to download and install fonts for GIMP, and it does use Google Fonts, so if you're not sure how to do that, check out that video. Here is the final result. So I've gotten a lot of requests for this tutorial where you have multiple characters inside the movie poster. So for starters, you're going to want to open each individual image into GIMP, and you can do that by going to File, Open, and just search for the file on your computer. In my case, I can go to File, Open Recent, and I can choose from any of the photos that I opened recently. For example, let's just go with this first photo here. And it might ask you to convert this to GIMP's native sRGB color space. I'll hit Convert. So I did erase the background of all these images ahead of time, as you can see here. But coming back to the original, the way I did this is using the Quick Mask tool. I do have an entire tutorial dedicated to how to use that Quick Mask tool if you want to check that out. But this is going to be the final result you get. As you can see, I do have a layer mask on here. So once we have the background removed on all of our images, we're going to want to create the actual composition for the poster. So I'll go to File, New, and I'm going to change the units in my case to inches. And there are a variety of different file sizes for a poster design, but in my case, I'll go with 11 by 17. That's one of the many standard dimensions you can use for a poster. And then I'll click the Advanced Options drop down, and for the X and Y resolution, I'm going to set this to 300 and hit the Tab key. If you're planning to print this, you'll probably want to set this between 300 or 400 ppi. And then finally, for the background color, I'm going to fill this with white and click OK. You may get this warning message here saying this is going to be a pretty large file type to begin with, pretty large file size, I should say, so just click OK. And so long as you don't have a super slow computer, GIMP should be able to handle making this. Once we have our blank poster created, we're going to want to start dragging assets into our poster design. So let's start with the main person here, which is going to be this woman here with the curly hair. So I'll start by clicking and dragging that tab over here to the tab of the blank poster and drag it on top here and release. That's going to drag and drop my image without the background on top of our poster design. Next, what I'll do is hit Shift S or come over here and grab the scale tool from the toolbox. And now I'm just going to scale this up. And I do want to make sure if I come over here to interpolation that this is set to either no halo or low halo. That may require some more time in order to scale this up, but it will produce a better result. And so I'm just going to scale the photo of the model up until basically she's nice and centered here and her elbow and her hand are just inside of the poster boundaries there. And I'll come over here and click Scale. So there is the first actress or the first model here in the poster. Let's bring in the second person, so that's going to be the guy here. So we'll do the same thing. We'll just click and drag him over to our blank poster composition and release. And in his case, I don't really like that he's facing to the right, so I'll flip him over so that he's facing the other way. I can do that using the Shift F key, which will bring up the flip tool. Make sure that the transform mode is set to layer and the direction is horizontal. And if I hover my mouse over this, you'll see a set of arrows there on my mouse pointer. So now when I click on this, it'll flip them over. And then I can hit the M key to grab my move tool, move this over into place, and we can adjust the size of this guy later. But for now, let's click and drag him below the first model there in the stacking order. And now we have our second guy. Now let's come over here and bring over the second actress, the second hypothetical actress. But I'll just click and drag her over here on top of our poster and release. So this photo is a lot smaller, so I'll hit Shift S once again. That'll bring up the scale tool, and now I'm just going to scale this photo up. And you want to minimize the amount of times you're scaling these photos because they will lose quality each time you scale them up or down. So we'll go with about right there and hit scale. And we'll drag the final actress below the actor there. So I'll hit the M key and we can work on repositioning everybody. Something else I like to do is bring in a center guide. So I'll go to Image, Guides, New Guide by Percent. We'll change the direction to vertical. Make sure this is set to 50, which is going to be 50%, and I'll click OK. And now we have a center guide. This allows us to just sort of see where the center of the composition is and adjust everybody to that center so maybe it looks a bit more even. All right, so that looks fine for now. What I'll do next is I'm going to blend all of the characters together. So part of that is going to be erasing some parts that are sticking out. Another part is going to be adding some highlight to each of the characters so that they stand out against each other as well as against the background. So let's start with erasing some parts here of the model that, for example, are poking out right here. So what I'll do is come over here to the actor layer, and let me just double click on this and name this actor. And maybe we'll come over here, lead actress, and then rename this one by double clicking supporting actress. That way we know who everybody is. So we'll come up to the actor layer, right click, and go to add layer mask. This is going to be a non-destructive way of erasing some of these portions down here. So we'll go with white full opacity and click add. So there we have a layer mask in the shape of our layer right here. And now I'll come up and grab my paint tool. So anytime you paint black on a layer mask, which I'll change my foreground color to right now, that's going to erase those pixels. Anytime you paint white, it's going to show those pixels. So in this case, we're trying to erase these pixels down here. So now you'll see that when I paint over those will disappear. And we can always bring those back if we need to. And also what I did here is I sort of made this blend a bit better by just painting some of the left side there. So that's going to be fine for now. Let's move on to the supporting actress. So here you'll see this part looks a bit clunky, so I'll right click, add layer mask. We'll go with white and click add. And then I'm just going to, you might want to increase the size. My hardness is set to 50. You can decrease the hardness for more fading and just sort of help these areas here fade out a bit. Like so. And if you don't like something, you can switch over to white and just paint it back in if you don't like the way it was erased. And then hit the X key and that'll switch over to black. So that's going to be fine for now. And I think I made this one too big, so I'm going to click on the main layer there. So clicking off the layer mask, Shift S to grab the scale tool. And now we're just going to scale this one in a bit because I think she's too big right now, just relative to everybody else because she is in the back. So she should be a bit smaller there, and I'll click scale. Hit the M key and we can move her slightly there. All right, so that looks fine for now. Now we need to add some highlight behind each of the actors so that they sort of stand out against one another. So I'll start with a highlight behind the main actress. So what I'll do is create a new layer, and I'll name this highlight 1. We're going to fill this with transparency and click OK. And we'll move this up to above the actor layer. Grab the paintbrush tool, switch over to white. And we're going to have a pretty large brush and make sure it's set to a pretty low hardness. And so we're just going to paint like so around the outline of our main actress there. And we can probably get rid of this guide by grabbing the move tool and moving that out of the way. We can bring it back later if we want to, but I'll grab my paintbrush tool again, hold Control, use my mouse wheel to zoom in, and then decrease the size of the brush. So there's our first set of highlighting. Now let's create another new highlight layer. So we'll just create a new layer, name this Highlight 2, fill it with transparency, and we'll click and drag this below the actor layer. And we'll do the same sort of thing. So let me hit Control Z. We're just following the outline of the actor, and that's just helping him stand out from the supporting actress there. The main issue right now is we don't have the main background here, so we don't really know where we need to paint the highlights to have the actors and actresses stand out against that background. So that's going to be the next part, is going to be bringing in that background photo. I'll go to File, Open as Layers. And I know that I opened this photo somewhat recently, so it should be somewhere in here. So it's going to be this photo here. So I'll click Open and convert this to GIMP's native sRGB color space. So there is that forest image. I'll hit Shift S, and that allows me to scale this up. I'll hold the Control key to scale from the center and scale it to about right there and hit Scale. Hit the M key and we can move this into place. I'm going to move it so that the path at the bottom is a bit more centered. And then I'm also going to click and drag this so that it is below the supporting actress in the stacking order, and we'll leave it there for now. So now we'll come back up to the paintbrush tool and continue with our highlights. So here we have a highlight, and actually I'll hit Control Z. I actually want to get rid of this highlight here, so I'll grab my eraser tool, increase the size of the brush, and we'll just sort of have this fade out a bit there. And then grab the paintbrush tool, come back to this Highlight 2 layer, and that's going to be this layer here around the main actor. So we're just going to paint that highlight there, and we can always grab the eraser tool and just sort of bring that in a bit. We don't want to overdo the highlight, and we are going to tone this down anyway with opacity. But the last thing I want to do is add a highlight behind the supporting actress. So let's come over here to the background layer, create a new layer, and name this Highlight 3. Click OK. And we'll grab the paintbrush tool, make sure white is the foreground color there, and just paint behind here, outlining the supporting actress. All right, so now let's turn down the highlights. So we're going to do that by dragging the opacity down. I went with around 27 or so, maybe 30. And I'll do the same for this version. So we'll come down here to 30 for all three highlight layers. Next, what I did here is I blended the colors and the brightness contrast of all three of these using the Levels tool. So that's going to allow us to adjust the brightness and contrast and adjust the colors for all three color channels. I do have an entire tutorial dedicated to the Levels tool, so I'll link that to this video. So what I'll do is come over here to the lead actress layer and go to Colors, Levels, and I'm going to adjust the levels here. So she's going to be sort of the main reference for the other two actor layers, so I am keeping that in mind. But I'm going to work on the value layer, which works on the brightness contrast. Then I'll move over to the red channel. So that is going to allow me to adjust the color balance of the reds in here. So I'm either adding cyan or I'm adding red. So there's going to be more red. If I go to the right, it'll be more cyan. So now we'll move on to the green color channel. This is either adding magenta or it's adding green. There you'll see we're adding more green to the highlights. And we can always do a preview. So there's a before, there's an after. And now we'll come over here to the blue. So this is either adding blue or it's adding yellow to this layer. So that looks pretty good. So I'll come over here and click OK. So now I'm going to perform similar levels adjustments to the other two actor layers, but do it in a way where these two look more similar in brightness, contrast, and color correction to this layer. That's just going to make it look like all three of these photos came from the same source or the same movie so that the poster, looks more cohesive. So I'll come over here to the actor layer and make sure I'm actually clicked on the actor layer and not the layer mask. And once again, I'll go to colors, levels, and we're not going to use the same settings from the other photo because each one of these photos is slightly different. But we're going to start on the value channel. So this is the brightness and contrast of the photo. And we're trying to match the brightness and contrast to the photo below. So we're going to leave the value channel there for now. We'll move on to the red channel. And so again, either adding red or adding cyan. And we'll move on to the green channel. So either magenta or green is being added to the photo. And we'll come up top here to the blue color channel. So we'll tweak the highlights here. We're either adding blue or adding yellow. So there you'll see this photo looks much closer. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to look like it just came from the same general environment here. So I might need to tweak the brightness of this just a little bit. That's going to be fine for now. I'll click OK. Finally, we'll move on to the supporting actress. So same thing, we'll go to colors, levels, and we'll just adjust the levels here, starting with the value channel. And we'll move on to the red channel. Then we'll go to the green channel. And finally, we'll move on to the blue channel. All right, so that looks pretty close. Again, not perfect, but definitely close enough, and I'll click OK on that. I do think that the main actor photo doesn't have enough contrast, so I'll click on that layer and go to Colors, Curves, and we'll just see if we can add a bit more contrast to that photo. So there you can see that's helping to bring that together just by creating a simple S-curve here in the Curves tool. And here's a before, here's an after. I'll click OK. So I would say all three of these are pretty close. All right, so next I want to add a gradient to the background, and then I'm going to add our final text, and that's going to bring everything together. So let's scroll down here to the background layer, and I'm going to click and drag this above the background photo. And then I want to come over here to my foreground color, and I'm going to change this to this sort of olive color here. You can copy the HTML notation. And for the background color, I have this sort of dark blue color. And once again, you can copy that, and I'll click OK. So I'll hit G on my keyboard to bring up the gradient tool. And I'm going to change the shape to radial. And I'm also going to change the colors here to foreground and background RGB. And I'm going to click and drag somewhere near the middle. And that's going to create this blue to olive color. And also what I'll do is change the layer mode of this to screen. So that's going to help us see the background photo there while still keeping some of the blue and olive colors. And I'm actually going to come over here and just swap the colors of the gradient by clicking this icon. And I'll just drag the olive color a bit closer to the edges there. And I can always drag the midpoint as well. There we go. So now I'll hit the Enter key. Once I have the main background in place, I'm going to start adding the text here. So let's come up to the very top to this lead actress layer. And I'll come over here and grab the text tool. And I'll just click on my composition. And the first line of text here I'll type with my caps lock key on is text me. So the name of this movie is Text Me Later. I'll hit Control A to select all the text. And I want to increase this. So let's go with 300. And I actually also want to change the font, so it is going to be this Bond Schrift font. But I'm going to get rid of the light. So if I start to type Bond Schrift, it'll come up with all the various font types for this font that I installed. So let's go with the top one here. And I'm also going to spread the letters out of this font. So let's go to 50 over here in the tool options for the text tool. Now let's do the bottom line, which is going to be later. So caps lock key is still on, I'll type later. Control A to select that. Let's increase this font size So I'll go with 650, and I also want to change the actual font. So I'll start to type Bond, and that'll bring up all of the options for the Bond Schrift font. And let's go with the bold option. And I also want to change the color of this. So I'll click on the little color icon, and let's go with this pinkish color, and I'll click OK. And then I'm going to grab my move tool, and let's move these items. So you do have to click on the actual pixels of the text. So we'll move that up like so. And then I'm going to click and hold here and grab the alignment tool, and we can just click and drag over both of these text layers. Align this relative to image, and then just click the center align option here. So there is our main text. Next, we're going to add the actor credits at the very top of the poster. So I'll come back over here and grab my text tool. And let me just set this up. So I'm going to get rid of the spacing between the letters there. And I think this is going to be fine for the size. And the font is going to be fine as well. So I'll come up top here and click. And with the caps lock key still on, I'll type the first name. We're going to click off to type the last name. And we're going to do that for all of these. So each name is going to have its own line. These are all fictitious actor names. So once those are all typed out, let's come back here and grab the move tool. And I'm just going to click and drag to create a guide so that I can align all these on the same line. And I'll hold Control and zoom in. So right now this is obviously a mess. I'm going to, let's raise this a bit. So now we're going to hover over the pixels of the names and just get these lined up. So it should snap to the guide. If it doesn't, go to View, Snap to Guides. And so let's continue, make sure we're hovered over the pixels of the text. And let's move this one over. So now we just need to work on the spacing. And actually, I'm not going to spend too much time on moving those around because I do want to make these bold. So let's do that first. Let's grab the text tool, double click on the last name until it selects all the characters. And we're just going to change the font here to bold. I also want to change the color, so I'll go from that white color to this pink color, which you can copy right there. And we'll do the same for all of these. And you might need to zoom out so that the text box here fits inside the window so you can see what's going on. All right, so now we can grab the move tool and finish evening these out, the spacing. So I'm just pretty much eyeballing this, so it won't be exact. And by the way, if you wanted to move both of these together, what you can do is click the transform lock icon here inside of the layers panel for both the layers you want to move. And then now when I move one of these, it'll move both of them, and that will save us some time. And then just make sure you untransform lock those or untransform link those, and I'll hold Control and zoom out. And then the last piece of text I had in here was the credits at the bottom. So I did just create a separate document for this to save some time. These were all just created using normal text layers. And if I grab the text tool and click on one of these, you can see the font I used was that Barlow condensed. But now, since I made this as a separate composition, I can simply click and drag this onto our poster and drag it on top of the poster and release. So that's going to drop all of the bottom credits as its own dropped buffer. So now I'm going to double click on this layer and rename it bottom credits. Hit the enter key. And with the move tool, I'm going to move these in place. If I hold the control key, it'll move it down in a straight line. So we'll put it right there. And I actually want this text to be white, so I can change the color of the text easily by coming over here and locking the alpha channel of the bottom credits layer, and then simply click and drag this white color on top of the layer, and that'll change all of the colors there of the text to white. So pretty much the last thing we need to do is just add the effects behind the text so that the text stands out a bit better against the background. So I'm going to start by organizing this. I'll come to the Jolie layer, and I'm just going to add a layer group, and I'm going to double click on this and name it Actor Credits. Hit the enter key, and then we'll just click and drag these text layers inside of this text group, or inside this layer group. So now if I hide this layer group, you'll see all of the actor names will hide as well. And then I can collapse that, and that helps clean that up. So now what I'll do is click on the later line of text, so that's this main text, and I'm going to click to create a new layer, and I'll just name this Credits Gradient, fill it with transparency, and click OK. So with this layer, we're going to add a gradient to the top and the bottom, and that's going to allow the bottom and top text to stand out a bit better. So I'll start by coming over here and just reset my foreground and background colors to black and white, and then grab the gradient tool. We'll change the shape to linear, and the color will change foreground and transparent, and make sure the foreground color is black. If not, just switch your colors up here. So we're going to draw one gradient at the very top, and we're going to hold the control key, and let's come over here and just swap this. So we're going to reverse the gradient. So once we have that in place, I'll hit the enter key, and I'm also going to add a gradient at the bottom here on the same layer. So holding the control key, that will draw this in straight line mode at the bottom, and I'll release, hit the enter key, and I can come over here and adjust the opacity of this to just sort of bring that down a bit. So about right there looks good. I'll come over here and grab my move tool and just move this guide out of the way. And finally, I do want to add some effects to the main title text here. So all I did for the top layer that says text to me is I clicked on it and came up here to the layer mode option, and I'm going to change this to LCH lightness. So that's going to help this top line of text interact with the layer below, which is going to be our actress. But that doesn't look great, so what I'll do is click on this lead actress layer and click to create a new layer. And I'm just going to name this black. Fill it with transparency and click OK. What we're going to do is paint some black behind the text here. So I'll grab my paintbrush tool, make sure my foreground color is set to black. We can increase the size, make sure the hardness is pretty low, and just paint some black behind both layers of text here. So this is just helping this stand out. And finally, to help this blend in a bit better, I'm going to change the layer mode. Let's go with overlay. So there you can see that'll help minimize that. And also what we can do is grab the eraser tool and just sort of erase anything that maybe goes too far outside here, like so. And the last thing I did was just add a bit of a glow to this main text. So the way I did that was came over here to the text layer, and I'll just duplicate this layer. And now I'll go to Filters, Light and Shadow, Drop Shadow. And instead of going with a black drop shadow, I'll change the color of this to white and click OK. And I'm also going to change the offset here by middle clicking on this number with my mouse. And I'm going to erase the 2, hit the tab key. So that will align the glow so that it is directly behind the lettering here as opposed to being slightly offset. And I can also increase the blur radius, and then I can increase the opacity and click OK. And I can either move this below the original text and actually move it all the way below the black layer, or actually I don't mind this being up top above the black layer so that it stands out a bit, but maybe we can just tweak the opacity so it's not too overbearing there. And that looks fine to me. So now if I click on the background layer, there is the final poster design, and I can export this by going to File, Export As, and I'll just navigate to the folder where I want to export this. There are a variety of file types you can export this to. I'll name this movie poster, multiple characters. There are a couple of different file types I recommend using. So JPEG is going to be if you plan to upload this to the web, for example, on a website or somewhere on social media. If you want to save this with minimal quality loss, I recommend going with something like a TIFF file, or you can go with a PDF. TIFF or PDF will probably be best for print. So in this case, let's just go with JPEG, and I'll hit the enter key. And I'll just keep the quality set to 70. You can turn that up if you want. I'll hit export. And there we go. All right, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, like this video and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified each time I have a brand new tutorial. You can also check out any of the links to my resources in the description of the video. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.